Senator Singh.
Thank you, Mr President. I rise to speak tonight about the tragic plight of hens and the recent policy shift that has occurred in my state of Tasmania in regard to their treatment and care through the banning of future battery hen facilities in Tasmania and an end to battery hen operations in the state. In 2011, each Australian consumed on average 192 eggs per year. Of the eggs sold in 2011, 34% were laid by hens in free-range environments and 9% in barn environments, a huge increase on the combined total of 20.6% in these more tolerable and humane environments for hens as recently as 2005. But despite this change over the past 6 years, the majority, at around 55% of eggs, are still collected from hens who spend their lives in cramped, usually dark, sometimes suffocating and crushing cages. Most battery hens in Australia, of which there are about 12 million, live in a space smaller than one A4 sheet of paper. Their instincts to spread their wings, clean themselves and move around are constantly frustrated and brushing up against the wire mesh that imprisons them from causing them to lose their feathers. They are expected to labour in that space for up to 18 months, producing an egg every 30 hours before their egg-laying rate declines and they are considered at the end of their usual life and disposed of accordingly. By the time they die, usually having lived less than 20% of their natural lives, 1 in 6 hens have broken bones sustained as a result of muscle and bone weakness caused by drastically limited range of movement, not usually being able to stand due to the low roofs in the cages. By any measure, these animals live miserable lives in producing a product that most of us take for granted every day. The production of eggs in Australia is guided by the Model Code of Practice for the Welfare of Animals, Domestic Poultry. The voluntary code, which has been recognised by the Primary Industries Ministerial Council, effectively shields the industry from scrutiny of the conditions in which it keeps hens and allows the industry to market their products to consumers according to industry-developed standards. These standards include the term to which I referred earlier, cage eggs, barn eggs and free-range eggs. These standards are able to modify and, despite the hope and belief of many in the community, these standards would be progressively improved. There are actually a number of changes under consideration right now that would actually worsen conditions for hens. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission is currently considering a trademark application lodged by the Australian Egg Corporation that would allow farms with up to 20,000 hens on a single hectare to be labelled as free-range, despite the current standard for free-range being set at 1,500 hens per hectare. Submissions to this determination close this Wednesday, the 20th of June. There are many considerations involved in that determination, including whether stocking densities are a core part of free-range production and whether these densities are in the public good. Regardless of the decisions that the ACCC makes, I have grave concerns about any step that further exacerbates the already appalling conditions for so many of these creatures. In my view, there is little justification for such appalling treatment of hens or any other animal on which we rely on or choose to raise for food. I do not think that one must make a dogmatic or strict approach to vegetarianism or veganism to find the excessive cruelty and brutality of battery egg production practices nauseating and unnecessary. And certainly I believe that we have a responsibility to reduce suffering wherever we are able, an obligation that extends to non-human animals and to those who are not able to speak for themselves. Our treatment of those over whom we exercise such total power reflects the character of our community, and battery conditions are not, I think, a good or true reflection of our community. This issue, Mr President, has been a constant source of community discussion in Tasmania for 30 years or more, thanks in part to the staunch advocacy of community members like the late Pam Clark, who was known as the Chook Woman, who began campaigning against conditions in battery farms since 1978. In relation to Pam Clark, Alison Alexander wrote that hens were debeaked, kept in tiny cages and never saw daylight. Clark thought once the authorities knew of the situation, it would soon protest it into Parliament and rang a bell to interrupt the speakers, danced with 2-metre-high hens, her name was Battery Bertha, on the steps of Parliament House, and tried physically to free battery hens from farms. Her protests caused her to be charged more than 50 times, and she spent 8 days in 8 stints at Risdon Jail. Since the days of Pam Clark's activism, we've had along the way other activists and organisations like Against Animal Cruelty Tasmania also pick up the fight against battery farming. And along the way, these activists were successful in bringing the plight of these animals to the attention of the Tasmanian Parliament and Tasmanian parliamentarians, and I want to acknowledge my former ministerial colleague, the Honourable David Llewellyn AM, who long worked to bring national attention to this issue. Despite his national efforts, in 2008 he introduced a bill to ensure minimum standards of welfare and a duty of care of farmers in charge of animals for their welfare. And I remember at that time David introduced that bill, speaking to that bill when I was in the House of Assembly in the Tasmanian Parliament about community expectations and attitudes towards animal welfare and how they were continuing to rise in Tasmania and change, and how much that was a good thing. I remember discussing how I often noticed that the free-range eggs on the supermarket shelves, and continually today, were often all gone, and it was only the caged eggs that remained on the supermarket shelves, with many people having no choice but to purchase those caged eggs. And I think that what that did show, and continues to show today, is how community and consumers are starting to be more and more aware of what they purchase, and that they prefer to purchase the free-range eggs. I know that well-known chef Kylie Kwong makes a deliberate approach of only using free-range eggs in her restaurants. And in fact, a number of restaurants now actually put it on their menu to ensure consumers when they go there that they are eating, in fact, free-range eggs. David Llewellyn has now left the Tasmanian Parliament, Mr President, but his views have been reflected in the Tasmanian Labor Government's recent decision to support primary producers involved in intensive farming to transition out of battery egg production, and the commitment of Minister Brian Green to ban future battery facilities. The government announced last month, in the lead-up to the Tasmanian state budget, that it would immediately ban any future battery hen operations and cap the number of existing pens in production. Minister Green is working with the industry to develop a transition plan which will see an end to battery hen operations in Tasmania and instead see the demand for locally produced eggs, particularly free-range, as the market's trend. I am pleased to learn that the Tasmanian industry acknowledges it is time for such a change and that it will work with the government during this transition. The Tasmanian government's commitment also extends to the phasing out of sow stalls by the middle of next year, fully 4 years before the pork industry's target of 2017. The problem posed by pregnant sow crates are similar to those faced by battery hens: limited movement that creates frailness, fear and stress in animals that are counted only as productive units. I want to recognise the courage of Minister Green and others in the government, not least Premier Lara Giddings and Member for Lyons Rebecca White, whose approach to this issue is based not only on compassion towards these vulnerable animals, but also in recognising that Tasmania has a unique place in the nation in producing premium, pure and ethical foods.